Welcome, everyone, to this Good Leadership Podcast. My name is Charles Good, your host and the president of the Institute for Management Studies. This podcast is designed to provide you with actionable insights and tools that you can use from discussing the research, stories, and background from recognized experts and practitioners to accelerate your impact in your current role. My goal is what we've discussed today will be immediately actionable and useful to you, and I'd love to hear your comments for this episode about what you're planning on implementing. It's my pleasure today to be joined by Ty Bennett, who has a natural ability to engage and empower others. Ty draws on his experience in the trenches to share real and tangible techniques about principles of leadership that continue to create his success. He has been featured as one of the top 40 under 40 and is a young, fresh voice providing interactive presentations that are engaging, dynamic, and inspiring. He's also the author of best-selling books, The Power of Influence, which is going to be the focus of today's program, and hopefully in a future episode, The Power of Storytelling, the Art of Influential Communication. He has also, Partnership is the New Leadership, I believe, right, Ty? That's your most recent book?
Yes.
Well, welcome to this episode. Thank you for joining me today. Let's get right into it. And I'd love to start each episode with a little bit of background about how your journey transitioned from where you were in high school. And it's a great background story. I love to hear it. And your successes and some of the obstacles as you were building up your company with your brother that was in the end wildly successful. But walk us through that journey and some of the obstacles you had along the way and some of the lessons that you learned.
Yeah, happy to do it. I'm always happy to partner with IMS. So my background, we were talking just before this and you were asking about my kids, and I've always been a pretty driven person from a young age and pretty one-track minded. When I got focused on something, I was going to go after it, whether that was sports or something else. And in high school, I got really into studying and learning about business, specifically through a program called DECA. And that led me to just desires around being an entrepreneur. I actually competed in the entrepreneurship in this big national competition. I took second in the nation. In that, there was lots of good learning experience through that process. So I went to school to study entrepreneurship. And because I was studying entrepreneurship, I started business on the side because I thought that was the point. My brother and I started a business in our young 20s. I was 21, he was 22. And it didn't take off like a rocket. We had some, I guess, from an outsider's perspective, some pretty quick success, but there were lots of ups and downs, right? And I think the thing that as an entrepreneur that sometimes you don't see the full picture of is it's the emotional roller coaster that sometimes is every hour of every day, right? It's being rejected 3 times in a row and then having a door open. And, it's just that process of learning and growing. And particularly for me, trying to figure out how at 21 to get people to take me seriously, to see me as someone that they would listen to, that they would buy from, that they would follow. That became a glaring weakness. and because of that, it became a passion for my own study, right? To figure out all of this. So I started to dive deep into leadership books, into programs, and trying to figure out everything that I could to find my voice, to find my style, to figure out how to connect and engage and ultimately influence people. The long story short of that is through the process of that learning and growth, we built that business to about 25 million a year in revenue. While still in our 20s, my role more and more became in the leading of our sales and leadership team, the training and development side. I really enjoyed speaking. It's something that I always was kind of fascinated in. Actually, as a 16-year-old, I was in charge of a conference for DECA, and I remember handing a check to a keynote speaker that we had hired and watching him mesmerize this audience. I thought that is the coolest thing in the world. Fast forward to, I was now putting on events and I brought in other speakers to speak to our leadership team and to our sales conventions. And so I'd pick their brain. It was just something I was always intrigued with. And that led me down the road of eventually writing my first book and then speaking. I've now written 4 and get a chance to speak to all sorts of groups and organizations virtually and in person. And it's been a fascinating last 10 years where my exclusive focus for the last decade has been in leadership development and specifically focused around influence, both from a leadership role, from a sales role, but from a communication role. How do we engage people? How do we build those relationships? And so I think we'll dive into that a little bit more, but that's what I think about, read about, talk about constantly. And I think for me, the reason I do is because I think that's where we get a chance to make the biggest impact. I think people, regardless of role, that step up as leaders that understand the principles of how you engage people better, it makes life better in every aspect.
I couldn't agree with you more. And thank you for sharing that story with us. Getting into influence now, let's start with kind of the definition. And the definition that I have here is that it's the power to sway or affect based on prestige, wealth, ability, or position. But that definition really doesn't get to the heart of the matter. And you bring up a interesting exception to that in your book with Mother Teresa. She had
Yeah.
lots of influence, yet she didn't have those qualities of prestige, of wealth, or ability. And one of the great quotes that you mentioned in your book that I love from her as well is that in this life, we cannot do great things. We can only do small things with great love. So speak to me a little bit about what makes someone influential and what is your definition of that?
Yeah, it's interesting when you read like that textbook definition, right? You would think that, I hold a position of leadership or of influence or I've got name recognition. And so people should have to listen to me. I have a unique perspective right now because I work with hundreds of organizations every year. And so I get this outsider perspective, but also like the real information because people see me as this leadership expert that's coming in. And so they want me to know what's working, what's not working. And it's often not the person who is the top position that has the most influence within an organization. You can see it. You can see there's like a magnetic pull to certain people. There's people who carry, when they speak, everybody seems to stop and listen and it carries weight. Why is that? I believe that our influence is really based around two things. It's based on who we are and how we treat people. I think that it's based around our character and our interaction. So Bob Berg, as a friend of mine, awesome speaker, wrote the book The Go-Giver, that series, which I think is great. He and John David Mann did that together. And their definition of influence is placing other people's interests first. And I think that like going in with that outward mindset, it's hard, it's not natural. It requires a shift in thinking. Because think about like when something happens, it's so natural to go, okay, how does this affect me? Right? That's just how we react. But a leader and someone who's influential, anyone who like builds real rapport with people has to somehow be able to switch that and not just go, how does this affect me? But that shift, I think, makes a big difference. And we can spend as much time in any of these areas as you want, but not to sell it short. I think sometimes it's practical and tangible to talk about the interaction piece, right? It's okay, how do I communicate better? How do I engage people? What are the skills that I need there? And sometimes we overlook and we gloss over the character piece. That piece, like if people can't buy into you, if they don't trust you, we could flush this out. I think there's multiple areas of this, but I mean, obviously integrity is a huge one, right? Being the kind of person that people can buy into, doing what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it, the way you said you're going to do it, right? Doing the right thing even when nobody's watching. That's huge. Being the same person in your public, private, and secret life. I mean, so many people are trying to compartmentalize their life and live one way in one area. And the reality is people see through it. Like we have strong BS meters, I think in our bodies, we can read people and people who feel comfortable in their own skin because they live congruently. I don't care what your values are. Like, I'm not saying you have to have this value or that value or whatever. Yeah, but if you're clear about your values and you live what you believe,
Right.
that comes through, right? And so I think that character piece is really where it starts. I think sometimes people overlook that piece, but yeah, I think it comes down to, who you are and how you treat people. And as you build that, what I find, at least in the corporate world, is as that influence grows, then most of the time, your roles and responsibilities grow with it.
No, that's great stuff. And you even put in your book the quote from Warren Buffett about what he likes to look for when he's hiring people, right? That first thing is personal integrity. Second thing is intelligence. Third is high energy level. But if they don't have the first, then the other two is going to kill them, right? So
That
it
doesn't matter.
starts with integrity. Gandhi represented that very well, but you list 7 things about integrity, 7 investments that you can make in it. Love to unpack a few of them because this is so
Okay.
critical to influence. And what you already said is be the same person in public, private, and secret so that there's no incongruity there, right? Take
Yeah.
responsibility, build people up, don't tear them down. What I'd like to get into though is give 100% of the time, because that's something that's a little bit unique, something that I think has far reaching implications, not only to integrity, but if you really want to separate yourself, not many people these days are giving 100% of themselves all the time. I mean, that's maybe the ideal, right? That's hard to do, but I love the story that you
Well,
do with John Wooden. So,
yeah, I mean, I think, I've had pushback from people who are like, okay, but I can't honestly like give 100% in everything. And maybe that's true. But are you present when you show up? Are you fully engaged, right? Are you giving everything that you have, or is your work half work? I think sometimes for me, like a mental game that I'll play is like I have to create stakes in my mind. So for like you might be given a project and it's honestly not that important. It's not that big of a deal. And
right,
so it's easy to go, yeah, it's not a big deal. I just put a little bit, let's just get it done. Right. And there's times that you can get by with that. But what if in your mind you went, okay, if the stakes were bigger, if I were turning this project in directly to the CEO and the board, I had to present this to the board or like whatever you want to make up in your mind, would you show up differently? And I think in most cases you probably would. What if you showed up like that most of, if not all of the time? And what I find is success becomes habit, right? Like
right,
take what I do for a sec, just like for an instant. When I am on stage, like I literally am on stage performing, like I have to show up fully. And it doesn't matter if I did great with the audience yesterday. It doesn't matter if I'm going to show up and be funnier tomorrow. And like none of that, like I am literally on stage. Now, most of our jobs are not in that realm. But if you think about it from that standpoint, it doesn't matter if I'm tired. It doesn't matter if I'll give you last week, literally. Okay. So my first speech of the week is on Monday in California. My flight's delayed. I get to the hotel at 2:30 a.m. My AV check is at 6 a.m. Right? I mean, so do quick math, not a lot of sleep.
right.
I give that speech. Now, they don't care that I showed up at 2:30. Like they don't care. This is their one event for the year. This is their annual event. They want me to kick off the event. That'd be great. I fly from there to Nashville, Tennessee. I don't know if you know how far California is to Tennessee. It's a long ways. I get there at 1 in the morning. My AV check, 6:30. Right? Like, I mean, literally, like every day, that's my week. For what I do, it is a requirement that I show up fully. Not everybody has that requirement, but what if we put it in place? What if we decided, right? I'm going to show up fully because you're going to stand out. I mean, you just will.
No, I would completely agree with you. I mean, these investments that you have in your book that we're mentioning right now are so critical in any type of leadership role you're in. Some of those are hopefully somewhat common. Some of those I think are common, but are often just not practiced enough. And another one I like to just kind of push on is just the humility piece, right? Being a humble
Mhm.
person and what that actually means, right? It's more concerned about doing what is right than being right, acting on good ideas, even if they're not your own, embracing the truth and not defending maybe an outdated position, but it makes you as a leader more approachable. More people are willing to open up to you, to connect with you and share with you versus a strong ego or coming across as someone that's really ego driven.
Yeah. I think that the word humble comes from the root of the word humus, which is like dark, rich soil. It's fertile for growth. And so as somebody who's humble, they have a growth mindset, right? They're open and willing to receive and want to learn and change and develop, which is essential for all of us. And like you said, it changes how people view you. You're authentic, you're approachable, they can connect with you. They know that you're not so egocentric, you're willing to give credit to other people. All those things start to come into play. But yeah, humility is it's an interesting one. One of the things I mentioned this in the beginning of this book. Every year I choose a word that I want to study. And actually what led me to writing the book, The Power of influence was my word for that year. But humility was a word that I chose one year. And it's if you take any attribute like humility, right? So I go in when I choose a word, I Google, I go on Amazon, I type it in, I just choose that's my reading list, like a bunch of those books that come up and try and do a 360 assessment, getting feedback from my team and other people, giving me thoughts on it. But when you dive deep into any kind of attribute like that, and it becomes a constant thought process, you inevitably start to grab onto some of it, right? I mean, I'm sure there's lots of areas of humility that I still need work on. But yeah, I want to be as open and willing to learn and grow as possible, because I think that I'm big on, if you were to ask me what word matters most in leadership, I would say relevancy. If I believe that, right? Because our world is changing so quickly that you can become irrelevant very quickly. And if I believe that, then I have to be humble, because what works right now in a year or two is not going to be what we're talking about. I mean, even doing this, right? The virtual piece of this, 2 years ago, I had done maybe like two virtual programs in my whole life, right? Like, and now I know everything there is to know about Zoom and any other platform. And like, you have to adapt and grow. And some of that's forced innovation, but it comes with a level of humility if we're going to do it right.
No, you're absolutely correct. And so I'd really encourage our listeners, 7 investments in integrity, be the same person you are in public, private, and secret, take responsibility, keep your promises and fulfill your commitments. Always try to build people up. Don't tear them down. Give that 100% of the time, be humble, and really live your values, whatever they may be. It's going to make you appear more authentic in your approach and your leadership style. Love to kind of jump into some of these applications, because some of these I love. We touched upon the first one, or you did, Ty, earlier, in developing outward thinking. And this is so critical, this perspective and mindset change to have. It's not about you. It's about them and your audience. I think a lot of leaders, speakers, people that I talk to in the profession get this wrong. Everyone wants to be an influencer these days. They want to have that status, but they have the wrong focus. Would you agree?
Yeah. And it's hard, right? I mean, we are such naturally ego-driven people. I probably has big a ego as anybody. It's easy to get off track, right? In that, I actually was meeting with somebody this morning that works with the Arbinger Institute, and a lot of their work is all around outward mindset. They've done a lot of leadership and self-deception and some other stuff that they've done. It is not a natural thought process. It's more natural for some than others. I actually wrote about, like, and this book's a couple of years old. So my son Tanner, he's my second child. He was born with this. It's natural for him, like way more than it is for me. I watch it when he was a little kid. If I offered him like a fruit snack, he'd ask for one for his sister. He's now 13 years old and he has it. Interestingly, Tanner was voted student body vice president for his school last week. And right before the vote came out, he's like, "Dad, I'm running against two really popular girls. Like, I don't know how this is going to work." And when we found out he won, my mom was with us and she goes, "See, Tan, kindness pays off." Like, it was just, that's how you think of him, right? He's just this genuinely concerned about others, good, has a good heart. I think some people have it more natural than others. I think if we just start to think about things from other people's perspective and start to force ourselves to look at it from that direction, and not just go, "Okay, no, that's ridiculous," but step back and go, "Okay, how do they see this? What are they feeling? What's going on? What we're developing, empathy and understanding, all these things that are great." That outward mindset, I think, is where it starts. I mean, I could give you so many examples of like how we screw this up, right? But if you think about most places we screw it up, if you were to just like say, okay, it didn't go right there, stop for a second and go, what was I thinking about in that moment? It's usually about yourself.
Having that present moment focus, right? Just to change that perspective and ask those right questions. Because as you indicate as well, I mean, if we can eliminate being selfish, we can be happier. We can exert more influence in the long run. There's a lot of positive qualities
Yeah.
associated with it. So even for the selfish person that says, "Well, then I'm not getting what I need," in the long run, you are. You're getting actually more of
Well,
that.
and when you hear the phrase like placing other people's interests first, or what we're talking about, like having an outward mindset, it's not being a doormat. It's not like being subservient, giving up anything that you need. That's not the
Right.
point. The point is, okay, how do I connect? How do I engage with people? And if I approach you and say, "Charles, let me tell you everything about how cool I am," that's probably not that engaging of a way to be, right? But if I approach and say, "Okay, how can I serve this person? Let me learn more about them. What are they all about?" And really take a genuine interest, the connection happens pretty easily.
No, definitely. And I think all leaders would love to be more charismatic. And charismatic, you defined as it includes optimism, energy, and confidence. But the primary ingredient, and I would agree with you, it's the focus on other people. Not many charismatic
Yeah,
people that I know are selfish and inwardly directed and don't really care about anyone else.
I had an interesting experience. So I'm a young entrepreneur. I'm like 22, 23. I don't know. I'm married at the time. I remember I met this guy named Kenton Worthington, super successful entrepreneur, but somebody super charismatic, right? And I came home and I told my wife that I met this guy. I was like, he's the most charismatic person I've ever met. And she goes, okay, what do you mean by that? And I was like, well, he's charismatic. And she's like, you can't define a word with the same word. Like, what does that mean? And I was like,
Right.
I don't know. Like, what does that mean? And so I started to watch him, and he has a bigger personality. He's more of an extrovert. I could name 4 or 5 people off the top of my head that are extremely charismatic leaders, like CEOs of huge companies, very introverted. So it's not that. My takeaway was this: anytime I interacted with Kenton in person, over email, social media, it didn't matter. I came away feeling better about myself for having been with him. And to me, I was like, that is charisma right there. Right. Like, he's genuinely happy for me, for my success. He will praise me. He'll give compliments. He'll ask questions. Like, it's not all about him. Now, do I know a lot? Is there stuff that I learn about him? And does he share his story? Yeah, absolutely. But every time I come away, I don't feel worse. I feel better about myself, and not just like feel better about him. I feel better about me. And I think that there's a secret there, that if we can figure out how to do that for other people, you'll be a magnet.
That's a great story demonstrating that definition because you're right. It's really hard to define charisma. It means a little bit something different to certain people. So love that definition. I do believe it's focusing on others. You have to have the other stuff as well. But if that focus isn't there, that outward thinking, it's usually not going to line up and you're not going to be thought of or viewed as very charismatic. How about focus? So love this one because for so long growing up, I was told it's all about being very interesting. You got to be more interesting. The more interesting you are, the more people are going to want to talk to you, right? And engage with you. And I love how you flipped that really and said it's not about being interesting, it's about being interested in the other person because their favorite topic to talk about usually is themselves. So I love that statement. I've used it. I've told my kids about it because that seems to be always an issue with people that how can I be more interesting or engaging to someone else?
So I love that this principle is catching on, particularly with my kids. We were on vacation recently and we were at Disney World, and my kids, so we have a baby. I have 5 kids. We have a baby up to a 16-year-old. And so the baby sometimes, is taking way too much time and like causes havoc. So my older kids are all just kind of hanging out, waiting for this ride as we're taking care of some needs. And they just start talking to the lady, the worker there, right? By the time I come back, a few minutes, not too long. By the time I come back, this lady goes, "You have the best kids in the whole world." And I was like, "Oh, that's nice. That's nice to hear." But this is what she said. She goes, "All they did is ask me questions, and they were interested and they were curious. Like, I learned nothing about you, but they like were genuinely interested in, like, I've never met kids like that." And I was like, "Yes, it's working. Like, the principle is working." Seriously, there are so many people who will talk about, to build connection, the best way to do that is to find commonality. I think that's a good way.
Right.
Like, I'm not taking anything away from that. But I think the best way to build it is to make it about them. And so if you're genuinely interested in other people, which, like, break down the skill set about, that means you're good at asking questions. That means that you are good at listening. That means that you show good body language. That means that you have good eye contact. That means that we could break it down a million ways, right? But the principle of focusing on being interested, not interesting, it works. I like to break down lots of ways we can do that. I'll share one that's like a very practical application of that. One of the things that I teach a lot of audiences, leaders in particular, is what I call the rule of two. I think everybody listening has probably had a conversation where the person you're talking to tends to one up everything that you say. Do you know what I'm talking
Right.
about? Right. Like, they They probably do it in like trying to find connection, but it kind of feels like they hijack the conversation. You say something and they're like, well, you know what happened to me? And
I
you're like,
agree. Right.
okay, right? It happens all the time. I'm guilty of it too. Because what happens as soon as like you share a story, Charles, like in my mind, a story pops in. I'm like, I want to share this, right? And I want to
Right.
jump right in. But the way we do it, we kind of make it feel like, okay, let's stop talking about you and now let's talk about me. And you're like,
Right.
okay. We don't validate what they're saying. So to help myself with this, because I was guilty of this too, I invented what I call the rule of two. And so consciously I had to do this. Anytime somebody says something about themselves, I have to ask at least two questions before I can talk about myself. I say at least two because maybe two is all you need. Maybe you need five, maybe, but instead of just jumping into me, I'm going to validate, ask like, "Well, that's really interesting, Charles. Tell me more about that. What about this? How do you do this?" And then there's probably a natural flow for me to share in that conversation, right? But the idea of being interested, being greater than being interesting, what came to mind as I was just saying that is I've had some people recently go, okay, but how do you apply that to social media, for example, right?
Right.
Like,
Right.
because being interesting is like what people respond to. I agree with that. Like there's a piece to that, that being interesting is going to get people's attention. But I also tell you this. I have a friend named Jason Hewlett. He is a speaker. He's very interesting, hilarious, great guy. Most people, that's not what they love about him. Jason Hewlett is the most genuinely happy for other people person that I've ever met in my whole life. Like the post that I saw from him today was him holding up a children's book of a friend who just published a children's book saying, you guys, you got to go get this. Now, does he need to do that? No. If you go watch his feed, does he promote other people's stuff all the time? Yes. Does he comment? Like he doesn't just like stuff, he comments like genuine comments, like, oh my gosh. And you love him for it because he truly is interested in other people. It has its place. Being interested wins people over.
Couldn't agree with you more. We could do a whole episode on celebrating the success of other people and all the benefits to
Yeah.
that, and why that's not common today, where almost it feels like if I celebrate their success, somehow that's diminishing what I can achieve or return. And that's not the case at all. I think people
It's
have it.
hard.
Yeah,
And
but
it's
it's
hard
hard to
because it
do.
hits it hits our own ego, right?
You're
Like
right.
we're such competitive people and that's not easy, but yeah, I think it's a great trait.
Yeah. So part of those micro skills, part of this is one of them you said was asking better questions. So let's just go into that a little more deep because I think a lot of difficulties, especially with those introverted leaders, is building rapport. How do I ask the right questions to build the rapport so that I can have a meaningful conversation with them or I can become interested in what they're doing? And you have a great acronym, FORM, which stands for the three or the four basic pillars that people really like to talk about, right? Within their area of influence or just their family, right? Their occupation, other passions that they might have, how much money they make, and so on and so forth. So are there any other sub skills that helps them ask those better questions or builds a sense of rapport? Because in some cases, like what you mentioned before, in networking events where people are just trying to connect with someone, what are some good questions? And you put a couple good questions in the book from Larry King, but what would you recommend they do or questions they ask to build that rapport so they can have a meaningful conversation with someone and feel like they're connecting, right?
So a couple thoughts on that. One is trying to be observant, being aware, right? If I can see something about someone or recognize something in them that I can grab onto, that's not just a general question, right? Like you're wearing a particular emblem or something that team you're into or something, like grabbing onto something like that. The more personal you get, the more responsive I think people are. And I think sometimes in a networking event, a business setting, sometimes people are like, well, I can't get personal. I would totally disagree because that's what people open up about. That's what they talk about. Like you can only say so much about the company you work for and the job you have. Like, what if you actually asked them, okay, do you have kids? What are you into? Like dive into it. Learn to ask, I mean, obviously like open-ended questions, questions where they can tell their story.
Versus
I
yes
mean,
or no. Right.
yeah, versus yes and no. Sometimes even like, okay, hey, you seem like a fascinating person. Tell me your story. Like, I want to hear a little bit more about you. Now, some people are going to open up with that and like tell you a whole story. And some people, it's going to be like peeling back the layers of the onion if you're
Right.
going to do it, right? They're maybe not going to open up. Did you see what I did there though? I led with a compliment. A lot of times people don't do that. Just a natural compliment. It has to feel comfortable. If you give compliments, the acronym I would say is GPS, genuine, personal, and specific. If you see it and you can say it naturally, Charles, I really like your glasses. Like just something that's natural. Don't force it. But if you can give a compliment, it's a pattern interrupt, right? It kind of grabs people's attention. And then the other thing that I think people miss is the question after the question. If I'm going to ask that question, like, tell me your story, if I don't get that much from you, I want to grab onto a part of that and go deeper. Right? Like, so you mentioned before that you used to do this. That's interesting. Tell me more about that. Right? Like, just dive into it a little bit more and give them a place to speak and to share. And then when you do, be genuinely engaged and interested in listening, right? Because the last thing that you want to do is come across as like you're just trying to get through the conversation, right? At a networking event, sometimes you're kind of like looking around and if you're not making eye contact or you seem distracted, it seems like that person's not important and nothing feels good about that.
Love that advice because that's so difficult for leaders. And you even kind of hit on another area that I think is also difficult is giving compliments and how to make them come across as authentic and genuine versus just contrived, or in most cases, they don't give enough. They aren't good at it because they're not practicing it. And then it's not coming off authentically when they do give it.
So I gave the acronym of GPS, genuine, personal, and specific. I'll give you the ABCs of compliments. The first level of compliments, we typically compliment people's appearance, right? And, I like your shoes, I like your whatever. You see something about somebody. If you don't know somebody, that may be about the only thing you can compliment. Obviously, there's areas that you can't go in appearance that you shouldn't compliment,
Right.
but it's just kind of a natural, easy icebreaker, simple compliment, right? Second, the B would be behavior, right? If you know somebody more, you see the way that they interact with somebody, you see the way they respond. So, like, still being specific, but I really was impressed with how you handled that lady that was really upset, and you said calm, or whatever the situation may be, right? And then the third, the C would be character. If you compliment somebody's character, go deeper. Now, obviously, you have to have a relationship. There has to be something based there. But like for leaders that you work with people on a regular basis, those compliments should be pretty easy, pretty natural, right? You should know enough about them that you can go a little bit deeper.
No, you're right. I love these acronyms, GPS, the ABCs of giving compliments, forms. So a lot of great stuff. So we talked about two applications so far, and I know we're getting toward the end of this episode, but I'd love to try one more. So the first one we talked about, develop that outward thinking, be interested, not interesting, and then practicing the platinum rule, which many people I think hopefully know by now. But if you could let us know what that
Yeah.
rule is, Ty, and how important that is into building your influence.
Yeah. So the platinum rule is a step above the golden rule. Most people are familiar with the golden rule, right? The golden rule, in essence, is treat other people the way you want to be treated. And my point around this is that the golden rule, in terms of morals and decency, is great. But when it comes to influence and leadership and relationships, it just doesn't work because it assumes that everybody wants the same things. And that's just not true, right? Everybody's
Couldn't agree
different.
with you more.
So the platinum rule, that step above is to treat other people the way they want to be treated. And so if I can understand, Charles, more about you, if I can understand the way you want to be communicated to, the things that are important to you, what your goals are, like all those things, I have the ability to treat you differently in a way that's more authentic and it's more connected to who you are. What this assumes is that leadership is more individual than it is collective, right? This puts in place that I'm not going to lead everybody the exact same way, right? I mean, I'm sorry, like I keep going back to my kids, but just there's such universal principles. I think that it's super easy, but my 5 kids are all very different, and I love them all the same, but I treat them all differently because they all have different personalities and different ways they need to be pushed and different like aspiration. I mean, all of that's different. Same with the people who work for me and the people I work with. So that idea to treat other people the way they want to be treated, just it requires a little bit more on our end, but it builds the influence a lot greater.
That's so important. And you're right. It takes to have that relationship, to know that person, to be able to treat them in the way they want. So sometimes the default setting is the golden rule when you first get to know someone, right? To
Yeah,
know
for
that
sure.
here are some basic decencies and things that I know that everyone would recognize and probably feel the same way about. But it's important to take it to that next level as you get to know those individuals. To
Yeah, and then if you can
you-
personalize it, like it just
right.
becomes so much more effective. I don't even, well, I know why. Last night I was watching the Golden State Warriors play basketball, and Steph Curry's my favorite player. It's just a joy to watch, in my opinion. And I don't know why I was thinking about this morning, but some people may have heard this story or not. Steph Curry is sponsored by Under Armour. Most people, by all accounts, most people would go, well, he should be sponsored by Nike. Do you know why he's not? Nike went in to renew his contract and they put no effort and preparation into the pitch. Literally, the guy who gave the pitch pulled up slides that said Kevin Durant on the slides.
You're kidding.
He
me.
hadn't he
Wow.
hadn't switched out his slide deck, and he said, "I'm out." He went to Under Armour. Estimates say that Nike has lost more than $1 billion because they didn't personalize his presentation. Right? I mean, think about that. Like that is crazy. I mean, just like a simple thing, but no preparation, no thought, no personalization to it. And that's to somebody Steph Curry's caliber. Now, to be fair, this was early in his career. He was,
Right.
but he was still like the 10th pick in the draft. Like he still had some potential, right? You weren't going to screw this up, but somebody did. And I hope they lost their job. I don't know what happened to him, but that's a huge
Costly
thing.
mistake.
Yeah. That changes the whole trajectory of, I mean, Under Armour would not be the company we think of it without Steph Curry.
Right.
And I mean, all that's the application of the platinum rule in a presentation. That's what we're talking about.
No, that's great. And that's a great story to emphasize that point. I love your stories. And like I said, I'm hoping that we can get back on another episode and just talk about the storytelling piece, because some of the stories that you present in your sessions, great stories. And every leader needs to be a better storyteller. And that's kind of a lost art that can be worked on and improved over time, but it does take practice. So, Ty, is there one thing that leaders can start doing tomorrow in terms of increasing or improving their influence? We covered a lot, but is there one thing that you would recommend them to start with?
Yeah, I mean, I love that we spent so much time on integrity. And to me, that's where I'd start. Like choose to invest in your integrity in one way, shape, or form. Maybe that's working on humility. Maybe that is fulfilling your commitments. Maybe that's showing up with a little bit more energy to be 100% present. Whatever that is, I think that foundationally is going to cause you to be somebody that people can buy into more. And that starts the process.
Great advice to leave us on. Remind listeners how they can get in contact with you.
I'm pretty easy to find. If you just search Ty Bennett, luckily there's no super famous people with my same name on social media, or you can find my books or anything. And hopefully you'll join us for an IMS program when I get to do one. So that'd be great.
Thank you, Ty. Really appreciate your time today and talking with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
This concludes this episode of the Good Leadership Podcast. If you like what you heard today, please share this with your colleagues and friends or anyone else who might find this valuable. If you'd like to subscribe, this podcast can be found both on Apple and Spotify and can also be accessed on the Institute for Management Studies website at ims-online.com. And remember, until next time, it's not what you know that makes a difference, but what you do consistently.